Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
This week's podcast is for all the people out there who either identify as a sensitive person or are raising sensitive people. I have to admit that I am a crier. When we go to movies and there's a sad part, I mean, even in action adventure movies, there's usually like a sad part where you see the hero's backstory of how he started fighting crime when his parents were killed in front of him. And like my kids turn, there's this moment where everyone in the family turns to see if mom is crying. And, you know, most of the time I am. And so it was no surprise this week when I cried, not once, but twice during the Grammys. The first was Camila Cabello, I'm not sure if I have her name pronounced exactly right, who was singing, I think First Love is the name of the song. It's basically about how her father was the first man that ever loved her. And she's singing it to her dad in the audience. Like, I dare you not to cry. And then later, Demi Lovato's breathtaking performance of the song that she wrote, her cry for help shortly before she overdosed about a year ago. And she's crying during the song and singing it anyway. And I'm crying with her. You know, I grew up in a household that did not love my big emotions. And a lot of my clients say that they were raised the same way, that we were raised by families who were in the most well-meaning way possible, trying to toughen us up because there was this belief out there that we wouldn't be able to handle the real world, that our big emotions were a sign of weakness and that we were going to get eaten alive out there in the real world. And I laugh a little bit now because now I understand that my big emotions aren't a problem at all, that just what needs to happen for me is my big emotions come up like a wave and then they go out just as quickly as a wave does. And they don't leave any lasting trace, and they actually make me more empathetic to the world. It's part of what makes me a great coach, is the fact that I feel things so easily. And it's a much bigger problem to have those big emotions and to squash them down or to not be able to feel emotions at all. It's not uncommon when I'm talking to clients for them to really have no sense of what they're feeling. I'll ask them, well, how do you feel about that? And they really can't even put to words what's happening for them because they were raised to believe that emotions weren't important, especially that certain emotions weren't important and they weren't socially acceptable. So I just want to go over quickly the 3 categories of emotion dismissal that I hear so frequently when I'm talking to you all, because this was a really common experience to have our emotions dismissed as a child, to the point where many, many adults got used to not feeling their emotions at all, to think emotions are even comical. Like, it's so funny when people get worked up. So here's the first category. The first category is that crying is ungrateful. That to be disappointed or upset or frustrated about something means that we're not grateful for all the other good things in our life. And when I was little, that often played out like if I got left out from a sleepover. My parents, in an effort to comfort me, would say something like, they would try to remind me of something good that had happened and tell me just to focus on the good thing. What they were really saying is that to be upset about one thing was putting my focus in the wrong place. And that is a good message. For sure, that's a good message, but that's a good message after you've processed the feeling of disappointment. Okay. And what they were trying to do in that moment is they were trying to push down the disappointment, to like shove the disappointment out with gratitude for the thing that they were mentioning. And that doesn't actually work, because anything we resist persists. Like anytime you try to shove a negative emotion down, it just doesn't work. It just makes the emotion bigger. And so if they'd been able to let me have the big emotion, the disappointment, and taught me how to feel it and then let it go, and then we could have thought about things that made me feel happier, that would have been a much more successful path. But a lot more often, there was this idea that I shouldn't be upset about being excluded from a birthday party because the rest of my life was so good. Like because I had food to eat for dinner and some kids were homeless. Like, what's the point of that problem when there's homeless kids? Like, do you think those kids are worried about getting excluded from a birthday party? No, they're not. And so that message that some problems were real and my problems weren't, like that's how that got expressed. And even like, I know this is so common because even when I was struggling with my own kids in their teen years, people would say things like to me, like I shouldn't be upset about how mean I thought my son was being because he still got good grades. Or he would be not wanting to go on vacation with us or or even come to family dinners. And people would say, well, at least he's not on drugs. And I would think to myself, like, how are those things even related? Like, I'm trying to ask, like, I'm trying to stay connected to my son. And you're telling me that that's not a worthy desire because I should just be so grateful that he's not on drugs, that like any behavior is okay as long as he's not on drugs and his grades are good. And that argument just doesn't make sense, because to be disappointed about, to have feelings about one thing doesn't dismiss all the other good things in our life. And when we tell ourselves and tell our kids that some problems matter and some problems don't, we're denying the truth of their experience. Like we think we're preventing them from becoming babies, which is a term that you hear a lot. Like, oh, he's such a baby about that. But the pain they're feeling about that is real. And we're much better served if we teach them to feel that pain and then let it go than we are to dismiss that pain altogether. So that category I kind of call like some problems are real and your problems aren't. And what happens over time is we learn to discount our problems and our desires. And over time, we lessen our ability to feel because we continuously dismiss the feelings that we get. And the feelings that we have can become like a wonderful compass, like a wonderful game of warmer, colder, what you want more in life. And when we dismiss that, we diminish that ability. It's like turning off our internal GPS. Okay, the second category is this idea that crying is annoying to the people around you. I know I'm not the only person that was given the message that my tears were unwelcome. That's something that I should do privately in my bedroom. I should hide my tears. I should put a happy face. There's that expression, like put a happy face on it. And so many clients have talked about how when they were little, they were told to go to their room. You can come out when you stop crying. But if you're going to be like that, go to your room. And for sure, people have told me that they were told, that they had to get it together before their father got home because your dad worked all day and he doesn't want to come home to see your crying face. So that idea that we have acceptable emotions and unacceptable emotions, like that is not a good message. And that we're supposed to manage our emotions so that other people don't have to manage theirs. Because really that's what you're saying, right? Like if I'm supposed to not cry so that you're not upset, then you're saying I have to control my emotions because you don't want to control yours. For some kids, what they learn is they have the power to manipulate those around them. That if they want something, they can go to their dad and just cry and he will give it to them because he can't stand to see them upset, or manipulate their mom. They'll just cry. And, because their mom hasn't learned to manage her feelings, she tries to not feel her feelings by giving their child whatever they want so that the crying will stop. Some kids for sure learn to manipulate their parents like that. And then other kids learn to people please through that. They feel responsible for making the adults around them happy. So they'll push down their own feelings so that the adults around them won't have to be uncomfortable. And I hear this from teen clients all the time. They're scared to tell their parents something because they'll take on all the worries themselves because they don't want their parents to be worried about them. They know that if they tell their mom what's really going on, that not only will they have to manage their own worry, but now they'll have to manage their mom's worry. And so they'll just hold it in rather than sharing it with the adults around them. And that's just heartbreaking because we don't want our kids to manage this stuff on their own. We want them to tell us what's really going on. But in order to do that, we have to make it safe for them to tell us. And the way that we make it safe for them to tell us things is for us to be responsible for our own emotions. Okay, we have to stop believing the lie that other people cause our emotions, that people can say things that will hurt our feelings. No, we hurt our feelings by believing what they said or by thinking they shouldn't have said that. When we tell our kids they shouldn't cry, what we're telling them is that their crying is responsible for our feelings. And that's just not true. Our feelings are caused by the thought we're having that they shouldn't be crying, that they shouldn't be upset about that thing, or that we have to do something to fix their crying and that doing something is going to be a problem for us. When we make our kids responsible for our emotions, most often we're just following the parenting that we received. But what that is, we're teaching our kids to be parent pleasers when we're not allowing them to have their own experience. Okay, when we're saying that you should feel differently about this, we're teaching them to not value their own experience, but to please us by not being upset about things that they're upset about. And in that way, we're actually teaching them to be people pleasers. And I have a lot more to say about how people pleasers get started by being parent pleasers, because that's I think it's such an interesting idea for us to think about as parents, but I didn't want this episode to be 47 minutes long. And so for this week, what I just want to separate out is your emotional reaction from their emotional reaction. If your child has big emotions, which most teenagers do, most teenagers have like a roller coaster of emotions in any given day. My daughter used to say something like, I had to set aside extra time today to be angsty. Like, I just love that because even she recognized that she shouldn't loop into her own emotions too much. And the reason that she had that kind of awareness is because I was able to separate out. I was able to role model for her, not taking emotions too seriously. And it sounds like a contradiction because I've spent most of this podcast talking about, that our feelings mean things and our feelings do mean things, but we can allow our feelings to come up and go out without attaching to them. And certainly as parents, developing some kind of benign detachment from our kids' emotions allows us to not make them responsible for our own emotions. It allows us to have that little bit of separation, allows our kids to feel the way that they do about their situation without us getting emotionally involved in their situation. And that way they can have a fight with a friend and get over it and go right back to being friends. And we haven't looped into the story and made that fight mean anything for us. Okay. And in that way, we teach our kids, we role model how other people are not responsible for our feelings and how to feel a feeling and then let it go. So I hope this has been helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. You can always reach me at Allie@allieirwin.com. Have a beautiful week, everyone.